Let's find the darn thing. So in renderListItem, instead of document create element, we're going to make a copy of that element. How do we find that element? What selector could we use? That works? What if we had other templates on the page? We don't, but we could be more specific and say like .flick.template to make sure that we're copying the right thing. Let's go ahead and do it that way. At the top here, I'm going to say const template equals document dot query selector. Oops. Dot flick dot template. I'm not going to say li because I could change it from an li to something else later, and that would be okay. Like my JavaScript doesn't need to care about that, so. If we again wanted to be super, super flexible, we could leave that selector up to the person who's using this library, pretending that the init down here isn't within the same file, and make it another option. While we're getting in the habit of doing this sort of thing, let's go ahead and do it. So we could say template selector. Does that name make sense, by the way? Do you get why I'm naming these things? Form selector, list selector, template selector. That string, the string dot flick dot template is a selector. That's what we call those things. Hence query selector and CSS selector. So then in init, we want to make sure we do something with this. We could save all those selectors on a property, or we could like save the template itself, like we did with the list. I think that's fine. So this dot template equals document dot query selector selectors dot template selector. Make sense? Let's try to make this a tad easier to fit on screen. Okay. So then down in renderListItem, instead of this, we already have it as this.template, right? So now we just need to know how to make a copy of it. Anybody have any idea? Say again? Clone? You believe him? Sure. Let's see. JavaScript DOM clone. Ooh, this time W3 Schools is above developer mozilla.org. These are usually going to be the first two results for anything DOM related. Either the official documentation on MDN or W3 Schools, which has a lot of good tutorials. If you want to learn more about pretty much anything in HTML or CSS or the DOM or whatever, W3 Schools has some pretty good tutorials. The cloneNode method returns a duplicate of the node on which this method was called. So because it says node and not element, we know it would also work on a text node, right? Cool. The DOM, remember, is the internal representation of our entire document, and each thing in it is called a node. It's a big tree structure. So our item, instead of calling document.createElement, we could get that template, this.template, dot clone node. Cool, cool. Now, this time, yeah, Dom. So let's think about that. Render list item. Where do we call that? Here's how we call it. Since we called it as a method with the dot syntax, we don't need to, right? It was called using method style invocation. Therefore, this is bound the way we expect anyway. Very good question, though. This time we're not changing the text content of the whole thing, right? We want to change the text content of just that one span. So we got to find that span. We've been calling query selector exclusively on document itself. You can also call query selector on an element to search within that selector. To search within that element. So if I said item.querySelector, I think the class was flick-name. That's the span right here. That would search only in this one item for that. If I already had 10 LIs on there, this wouldn't return any of the others, just this one, because item.querySelector is only going to search inside that one item, inside the clone. So we could set the text content of that thing. Make sense? We could do this part first. Just, I think it's slightly more readable that way. Don't worry about the buttons yet. Let's just see if this much works. Refresh the page. Add a flick. The fly. Aw, cuss. Cannot set property text content of null. Looks like my query selector didn't turn anything. Item.querySelector flick name. Class of flick name. Let's look at that documentation for cloneNode once again. It takes an argument. Deep. Deep, optional. True if the children of the node should also be cloned, or false to clone only the specified node. So we need to stick true in there, or it'll make a copy of that LI, but nothing that's inside the LI, and a fat lot of good that does us. So we'll say cloneNode true. Refresh. The old fly. No errors. I don't see anything. Let's have a look here. Let's have a look at the DOM. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's illustrate something. App dot list. It's got two things in it, doesn't it? It's hidden, right? Sam, you made eye contact a minute ago. Think it's hidden? Yeah. What's going to happen now is I'm going to know your face better than anybody else's because I'm so worried about it. So how do we fix that? Class list. So don't take this personally, but I'm going to ask you to Stop answering for a little while just so people can sit and think about the answers for slightly longer. His name is Dom. What do you expect? Okay, so he said class list. So JS DOM class list. Element.classList, a read-only property which returns a live DOM token list collection of the class attributes of the element. Whatever that means. Let's just have a look. Okay, so app.list is our list. App.list.firstChild is the one we added. Right? .class list. It looks very array-like. Documentation told us it's some other kind of collection, but it looks very array-like, and we can get to the items that way. So Flick and template are both in there. I saw when I started typing class, I also saw class name. So that's like the actual attribute value. It has them separated by a space. Class list being some sort of collection, I'm guessing is going to be a little easier to work with. DOM token list, it says. Let's click on that and see what we can learn about that data type. Has a length, has a value, which returns the value of the list as some kind of special string. Ooh, and it has some methods. Item contains, returns true if the list contains the given token, otherwise false. Neat. Add, adds the given token to the list. Remove, removes the specified token from the list. Sounds like just what we want. So what if I say app list first child class list dot remove the string template? It shows up. So we need to remove that. We could just do that first thing. Item.classList.remove template. Not dot template. We just put the name of the class, not a selector, but the actual name of the class as a string. Does it work? The little buzzy thing. Yay! A park for creatures from the Cretaceous, not just the Jurassic eras. Yay, it works. And how about app.flicks, our array? Still looks good. Excellent. Button doesn't do anything yet, but we got to start somewhere. And this is already a pretty dang big commit. Definitely worth storing our progress at this point. So clone a template when clone a template to build the list items.